Hello, I'm Jackie Glosniak, and welcome to the A-List. Joining me today is Rob Stafford, an award-winning NBC5 news anchor from right here in Chicago. Welcome, Mr. Stafford.
Jackie, pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So the reason why I invited you on the show today is to talk about your position at NBC5 and your journey on how you got there.
It started a long time ago, Jackie. In 1982, I started in television in Duluth, Minnesota. I became interested in being a reporter in college when I started writing for the college newspaper, and went to a small television station that had equipment that's not as good as the equipment you have here at the high school, and made a lot of mistakes, became a reporter, got a little bit better, put together a resume tape, sent it out to a bigger city, Green Bay, Wisconsin, got a job there. I got a little bit better, sent out another videotape to Orlando, Florida, got a job there, and Chicago after that, then worked at the network for a while, and now I'm co-anchoring at NBC5.
Okay, and you said that your journey kind of started in college, correct?
Yes, that's when I decided I wanted to be a reporter.
Okay, was there any particular class you took or person, like a teacher, that inspired you to follow this career path?
I think in high school, an English teacher named Bud Warren taught me how to write, and I love to tell stories. And in college, I decided to check out the college newspaper and became a features reporter for them, and later a features editor. And I love to report because every day is different. You get a story, and you go on an adventure, and you meet new people, and you try to talk them into talking to you and sharing information, and you never know what to expect each day. So I think the combination of the English teacher in high school and then actually reporting for the college newspaper and going out into the community and finding information and telling stories, those two things are what convinced me that this is what I wanted to do for my life.
Okay. And if you could tell me a little more about what the job of news anchor means. Some people think it's just reading, a prompter, where it probably entails a lot more than that.
It does. There is it's a lot. I would say it's harder than it looks. And I come to doing this job after being a reporter primarily for 28 years. I anchored in each of the markets I was in. I did a morning show in Orlando, I anchored some in Duluth, but primarily I was a guy out on the street collecting information. So to be a good anchor, every anchor's been a reporter. You have to know the news, you have to like the news, you have to be up on current events and know what's happening. Because when you're out there on the set each night, sometimes there's breaking news and you have to be able to, off the cuff, without a teleprompter, explain what's happening and communicate with people in a concise way. And so you have to have the background knowledge of what really everything that's going on in the community that you're living. So a big part of it is reading the teleprompter, and that you have to learn how to do, and you get kind of used to doing that. But a lot of it is just being able to react quickly to different situations, to multitask, to have fun on fun stories, and to get along with your co-anchor. Allison Rosati has been doing this for years, and I just started this job as co-anchoring the 5, 6, and 10, and she's been great, and Brant Miller, they've been great. And so part of it is having fun with the people you're with, reacting to what they say, listening, and so there are a lot of other things, not just reading the teleprompter.
Yeah, and a lot of your stuff, you started off being a field reporter, going out on the scene, and now your main focus is being a desk news anchor, correct?
Yes.
Which do you prefer and why?
Well, I'll tell you, when it's 30 below in Chicago and I'm on the desk, I prefer that. But this is something that sort of evolved, and I'm now not as young as I used to be, so I look at this as a new challenge, and being live every day at 5, 6, and 10 for not just having a 90-second report is a challenge to me. I find it very interesting, I find it challenging, and it's new for me to have this job. So I love it. It's a great new thing to do.
And you said you do 5 and 6 o'clock news.
5, 6, and then 10.
So you're at the station mostly in the evening, or what is a typical day like for you?
You come in the afternoon and you go over the scripts, but your day starts way before that. I get the newspapers. I read 3 newspapers a day. I listen to news radio all the time, and And because of the BlackBerries that we carry, we are in communication with the news station from the beginning of the day, and they email us what the stories of the day are and who's reporting them and which shows they're going to be in. And there's a whole web component to television news now, because that's the way
it's transforming.
Well, that's the way you get your news, right,
Yeah.
Jackie?
A lot of text updates,
yeah,
email.
and for us older people, over 50, we need to learn to communicate in that way, because we put stuff on the web as well as broadcast at 5, 6, and 10. So during the day, you keep apprised of all the stories that are being covered by the reporters. Then you come in the afternoon, we get makeup, and we talk to the producers about what stories are coming up, and then you start looking at the scripts. And I make a lot of changes because I like to write, and it's easier to read the stuff that you write yourself. And then you go over and you hope all the stories are done on time, and if they're not, you have what's called an IFB, an earpiece. And then when the news starts, at the last minute, they might say to you, that story isn't ready yet, go to the second story. So you have to be sort of like game time. You get ready for the game, you practice, and then you go on and you do your best.
And you were saying earlier, when you were doing like the chronological order of how you got to NBC5 in Chicago, you previously worked with Dateline NBC.
Yes, still do, actually.
Was that
sometimes.
out of Chicago?
I was based in Chicago, but I traveled around the country for Dateline for 11 years.
Okay.
And Dateline is owned by NBC, which owns NBC5. So I still occasionally do stories for Dateline and have one in the works right now, actually.
But you're doing more stuff with the local station, correct?
Yeah, well, I work on the primary anchor, but occasionally Dateline, there'll be a story in Chicago, and I'll work on it. And Dateline stories are not breaking news. It's something that you can spend 6 months on.
Yeah.
And they are very long stories. They're 1-hour stories, usually crime-related. But for Dateline, that was my primary job for 11 years, and I traveled all over the country and got to tell a lot of stories. And it was a fascinating job, and it was a lot of fun to do it because you had a long time. You didn't have to put the story on that night. You could spend 6 months, sometimes a year on one story, and you had a lot of help with a lot of producers.
You just touched a little bit upon the timing with working from like a national station where you have 6 months to every night doing something with the local news. Personally, for you, what's one of the big differences between working in the station for a national station versus a local station, like the feel of the people or the stories? What kind of like the differences in stories?
The caliber of people working in Chicago and at the network it's very high, because everybody who has a job in Chicago has been doing this for a long time, because this is a big market. Chicago's the third market in the country. Duluth, where I started, is probably the 130th or 40th size market. So to get to Chicago, you've been doing this for a while. So I'd say the caliber of people is very high. Dateline's different because of the fact that it is not a daily show. So there's a real difference between doing taped television and live television. And the biggest transition for me from going to Dateline to anchoring the news in Chicago is that anchoring's live.
Yeah.
So there's no redo.
You one shot.
Yeah, for Dateline, you'll do a stand-up where you're taping something and saying something, and you'll mess up, and you'll just do it over again and over again and over again, or 30 times or whatever it takes. When it's live, it's live.
Yeah.
So.
And this is no offense to your age, but we were just talking a little about, you said you were over 50. We'll just leave it at that. And since my generation's growing up in this whole media age, blogging, Facebook, Twitter, and your generation was more print journalism, I would say.
Yes.
What do you personally, and for your generation in general, do you find it difficult to keep up with that transition?
Well, I think all of it's about storytelling and content. So all these are just ways of delivering information. So what I find, and I just got on Facebook, and will you be my friend, Jackie?
Sure.
My kids won't.
Okay.
They won't respond to me.
I have my mom on my Facebook, so.
Then she must be cool, I
Yeah,
guess.
I guess.
But we have to, I mean, we have to, it's just a way of reaching more people. And I guess the hardest thing for me is just constantly saying stuff about what you're doing.
Yeah.
That is not me. So I think it's great when you can just sort of post things and say, hey, we're working on this story, please watch tonight at 5, 6, or 10. But a lot of people respond, and I find you're constantly responding, and it takes up a lot of time. So I have to learn a quicker way to deal with it.
Do you think there's anything negative about it being so fast-paced?
Well,
whole just technology, maybe just the whole overtake of technology, and it's just updates, every.
Well, I think the only negative is that, or one negative is that people should have a filter before they speak or write. And the internet, I mean, sometimes the people who Twitter just constantly about stuff, once it's written, it's done, it's out there permanently. Somebody can print it out and have it, or if you put something on the internet or on Facebook, a picture, or you say something, and you didn't really think about it, it's permanent. And that, I think, that's the biggest, I think, challenge for me in Facebook, because having worked particularly at Dateline for 10, 11 years, every script I worked on, we would go over it, and we'd talk to our editors about it, and we talk to our lawyers about it, and we talk to standards department about, are we being fair here, and everything's carefully weighed. When you're on the internet and you're just sort of saying stuff very quickly, I think you might say something that you can make a mistake, or say something you don't mean, or hurt somebody unintentionally, and once it's out there, you can't get it back.
Have producers for your show at NBC talked with you anchors one-on-one or just as a group and set like a list of guidelines about like how to appropriately use stuff like Facebook, or like have they talked to you about, if you say this, you won't get fired, but you'll be reprimanded kind of thing?
No, because we already know that, because we're on live all the time, so we have filters all the time.
Yeah.
I have quite a filter, but no, they're talking about us sort of like, hello, there are 300 million people on Facebook, you guys need to be doing this. And then we say, well, okay, help me do this. When I set up my Facebook page, I didn't even have a picture, I just had sort of that silhouette. And a younger reporter in the newsroom, Alex Perez, who's really sharp and quick, and the younger reporters know all this stuff.
Yeah, it's like
and
second
he
nature.
goes, whoa, let me help you here, and he got my picture put on there, and then the filters to make sure people don't get too much information. He helped me set all that up. So it's just really, how do you do it? How do you use it? Those are the things that they're talking about. We know that there's no problem. We aren't reckless. We're very careful about what we say, so they don't really worry about that.
And with an obvious convergence of news being from, television, watching it every night at a certain time, to, online whenever you want, 24/7, where do you see the television news industry 10 years from now?
Good question. I have no idea.
It's changing so much.
That's going to be up to you.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's your world. Look, when I grew up, my family, very into news. I grew up in a small town in New Hampshire, and Boston was the big market nearby. And we'd sit down at 6 o'clock and watch the news every night. You don't do that, and your kids won't do that. And all the kids working right here in this studio aren't going to do that. So I don't know what's going to happen, but the news audiences are getting older, and the younger crowd, they still get information, they just do it in a different way. So I'm not sure what broadcasting is going to be in 10 years, but I can tell you this, that covering the news, reporting the news, having people go out and get content and collect it will always be done, because without it, nobody's got anything to say. So the question is, how is it going to be delivered? And I think there will be more and more options, probably through cable and the internet. And hopefully broadcasting. I certainly want it for at least another 10.
Yeah.
Love to have 20, but we'll see.
And for a student like myself who's very interested in the broadcast journalism field, what kind of advice would you give regarding further education, internships, just getting your name out there? Any advice?
Do all of the above. I mean, I think the key to anything, whether you're getting into television or not, is for kids, and I have 3 kids and one's your age, is find something you like to do, and the rest you'll figure out. But you don't want to end up with a job you don't want to do. So the best way to figure out whether you like something is to have an internship or to try it out. I worked for the college newspaper, so I got to report. Then I got an internship with a small newspaper and really loved it. And that helped me figure out what I wanted to do. I had other internships before that in other fields that I thought I wanted to do, and in fact, I went to college thinking I wanted to work in prisons, in corrections, really.
Yeah.
And I interned my freshman year at the Minnesota State Prison in Stillwater, Minnesota, and it was a fascinating experience, but I came out of that internship saying, I don't want to work in prisons. I'd like to write about them, I think, but I don't want to work in them. So because I had the internship, I figured out that's something I don't want to do, and then I figured out what I do want to do.
And this is a pretty broad question, but when you were reporting, and now that you're on the desk, but regardless, what has been one of your favorite stories that you've reported or written about, and what's been your favorite story?
Ooh, that's tough. I mean, forever, out of my
Sure.
28 years. I did a story on a little boy with a disease called progeria, and I followed him for 3 years, and he had the best attitude of anybody I've met in my life, and that was the best story I think I've ever done.
And what about like a least favorite story? Is there like a certain type of story that you don't really care for reporting on?
Well, the toughest thing about our job is that you are often doing stories about really sad things, and you are often meeting people who are having the worst day of their lives because something has happened to them. And so that's hard to go into those situations, but the key is to have compassion and to treat people well. And but it's very tricky to be talking to people about what you see on the news every night. I mean, there's a lot of crime in the city of Chicago. There isn't any big city, and a lot of it involves young people. And so you have to be sensitive about the way you tell the story, because people are trusting you to tell something very personal about them. And that is a difficult thing to do every day. And I think we do it well, but it takes a certain person to do that kind of a job. So those are not stories you like to tell, but they have to be told. And we like to think we do it in a compassionate way.
And before we have to go, are there any funny stories, any funny moments at NBC here in Chicago that you'd like to share? We
have fun all the time. We can't share all of that, though.
Yeah.
Well, when things go wrong, the key is to laugh. And there's a lot of things that behind the scenes that happens at every TV station, and you kind of go with the flow. But there are just some days when your mouth just doesn't work. And have you ever had a day like
Yeah.
that? Not today. You're doing great.
Thank you.
But those are the days where you either kind of get uptight about it or you just kind of chuckle.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Mr. Stafford, thank you for joining
Jackie,
us on the
thanks
A-List
a lot.
today. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure, and I'm very impressed by the TV station you have here.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning into A-List. I'm Jackie Glosniak. Join us next time with more interesting guests on the A-List.